Hello comrades, and welcome to the channel. A wild electrified honey badger just appeared here to teach you all about electricity in this game. Let's light up the topics firstly. Compresive Text Based Guide. Research needed. Difference between megawatts and megawatts hour. What's a kilowatt and a kilowatt hour? The electric substation. Understanding it is mastering the game. Which cables and switches to use and when? Trolleybus, tram and train trafos. Useful overlays. Producing and using power locally whilst exporting the excess and having the imported power as a backup. As always, if you enjoyed these guides, like the video, subscribe if you haven't done so, and at the end of the video, leave a comment down below what new things you've learned from this guide or what I may have missed in it. Firstly, I want to start from where I got all my information. Snoop, or Silent Shadows guides, go very in depth when it comes to electricity. This guide is more complete than what I am sharing with you in this video. However, although complete, the guide offers theoretical knowledge and doesn't touch that much on the practical applications and examples. The video got created based on my understanding of his guide by collecting from it only the juicy parts that will help you power your Republic. In terms of research to conduct for power, pretty much everything is unlocked from the start. The only thing being locked are the high voltage wires of 18 megawatts, and with the new patch it will be the 14 megawatts too. This can be researched with the Technical University by doing Introduction to Metallurgy, Steel Material Fatigue Study, Steel Cables, and then high capacity electric wiring. Also, when it comes to nuclear power, everything is locked behind the research, similar with renewable energy and also the gas power plant. That should be all to cover in research terms. Let's now discuss about the difference between megawatts and megawatts hour. Firstly, some context. The game runs on two separate clocks. The first one is the worker clock. This worker clock is split into 16 hours plus 8 hours, which is a 24-hour period. This one is not useful for us in our guide. It's just for the citizens. Just know it exists for now. Don't care about it. The second clock is the day or workday clock. It basically means that each single day in workers and resources is 60 seconds long at 1x speed. Think of it as 1 work hour in game equals 1 second in real life at 1x game speed. This is present on all production buildings where it states max production per workday. So for example, if I go over here at my oil refinery, maximum production per workday, it means that in 60 seconds I will be able to produce 10,050 megawatts hour of power. It's a bit confusing. Just ignore your citizens' hours at the moment and just focus on the 60 seconds day length. Now, as you noticed, all your power cabling is in megawatts. However, the production and consumption is in megawatts hour. Now, we know the maximum production per workday is 1050 megawatts hour of power. If we take that 1050 and divide it by 60, we are going to get exactly the megawattage. In this case, 1050/60 is actually equal to 17.5 megawatts. That's how you transform the megawatts hour into megawatts. For you math nerds, 1 megawatt is equal to 60 megawatts hour / 60 seconds. 1 megawatt hour is equal to 0.016 megawatts times 60 seconds. Well, let's get some practical examples, since the math is mathing, but the brain gets fried. Firstly, let's kick out of the window megawatt hour. Transform everything into megawatts and focus on just using megawatts to simplify your life. Let's start with production and consumption buildings, since those are usually the ones that use megawatt hour. For the coal power plant over here, it produces 1400 megawatts hour per workday. This means that it produces 23.3 megawatts per real life second. A gas power plant, on the other hand, produces 1050 megawatts hour per workday. This means that it produces 17.5 megawatts per real life second. A single nuclear power plant produces 4680 megawatts power. This means that it produces a whopping 78 megawatts per second. And a dual nuclear power plant produces 9360 megawatts of power. You guessed it, it's double. That means 156 megawatts hour. As for consumption buildings, I won't start to go into all buildings and just show you a few examples. This citizen building, the flats brick, consumes 18 megawatts hour. This means that per second it consumes 0.3 megawatts. A clothing factory consumes 3.6 megawatts hour. This means that per second it consumes 0.06 megawatts. A cargo train station consumes 312 megawatts hour. This means a whopping 5.2 megawatts hour. I included the cargo train station here as an example to make your eyes pop on something. Namely that all your buildings, be it flats, factories, train stations, show the maximum consumption. Therefore, the flats will not consume 0.3 megawatts if they don't have all their citizen slots filled. The clothing factory will not consume 0.06 megawatts if the production is not at 100%. Also, a cargo train station doesn't consume 5.2 megawatts hour each time a train arrives. It only does if you got 6 full-length trains unloading at the same exact time. I wanted to mention this since people on Reddit love complaining about the fact that the train stations consume so much power without realizing that if they got a single full-length train, the power consumption is not 5.2 megawatts, but instead is just a mere 0.8 megawatts. Well, moving on to the next topic. The previous one was so filled of information that the sole reason I included the kilowatts and the kilowatt hour here is just so you know it exists. This one is kind of simple. It applies to everything from above. It's just split by 1000. So 1 megawatt, it's actually 1000 kilowatts. That's kind of all. I couldn't find any reason to explain it further because neither I don't know exactly how it works or how it's helpful. I've never used it, to be honest. The electric substation has its own topic here, since understanding it in depth will not only help you with the next topic, where we discuss cabling, but also it will allow you to master the electricity in the game. Now, an electric substation can provide a maximum of 2.5 megawatts of power. It has in total 3 power inputs we can see over here. These again are inputs. So if you want to connect to electric substations like this, you're going to notice that even if you import power, the first one connected does receive power, however the second one is dead. Therefore, these types of connections are not correct. So let's remove this cable over here and then place it here. Barely now, this electric substation will have power on it. Now, you're going to notice something at them. They have 2.5 megawatts of power. If we're gonna check all the medium voltage wires, you're going to see that the maximum is 2.35. There is no possible way to connect a single cable to the electric substation and have the maximum allowed value over here. You always need 2 cables. Similar for underground wires. Over here it's 1.85. With that out of the way, there are 2 types of builders in this game. You got the chill builders that usually connect only a single cable to each individual electric substation. So you would have underground cables going to each single substation like this. And in this case, you will be able to connect a total of 6 substations. And then you got the min-maxers that prefer to connect every single substation with 2 wires. So they're gonna start with firstly a large medium voltage wire going to each individual substation. And then they're gonna have a small medium voltage wire that connect to the other connection point. This will assure you, if you paid close attention, 185 plus 0.65, it's actually 2.5. So you can actually abuse the 100% needed for the electric substation in one single go. The downside of this is that to a single power transformer, you can only connect 3 substations instead of 6. Now, let's do some quick math over here. 2.5 megawatts is 100%. How much percentage is 1.85 megawatts? I did the math and it's somewhere around 72%. So, as long as you take care for each estimated maximum consumption over here to not pass 72%, you won't have any electricity problem caused by overloads. Let's go a bit into Siberia done right and show you exactly what I mean. Now, here's Badgerville. Each substation that I have, I try to keep it as much as possible under 72% maximum power consumption over here, underestimated. We can see that everywhere is under 72%. This helps a lot to make sure that there are no unhappy citizens because of electricity problems. All of the connections need to be under 72% over here. Underground, of course, everything is connected with underground medium voltage wires. You can use above ground voltage wires, however, please be mindful that it's not that efficient when it comes to buildings. You might need to play around with buildings a bit in order to make sure that they are not in the way of the construction themselves. In case you decide to use the above ground cabling, then the percentage jumps from 72% to 92%. It's a huge increase, but it comes at the risk of having power poles where you don't want them. Hope this makes sense. Let's go to cabling now. In order to understand which cables to use and where, let's use the electric substation's parameters. I know that behind the scenes I will use the 1.8 megawatts underground wires to connect my electric substations. 1.8 megawatts times 6, it's equal to 10.8 megawatts. Therefore, the favored cable that I'm going to use to connect my power substation to my main grid will be the 13 megawatts one. I could opt to use the 10 megawatts one, but again, the math is 10.8, so I might have electricity problems if I'm gonna use them. Now, if I would use 2 cables per electric substation, one 1.8 and the other one 0.6, well, in that case, I will be able to only connect 3 electric substations. 3 times 2.5, it's 7.5 megawatts. In this scenario, I can clearly use the 8 megawatts wire without any problem to connect my power substation. If for whatever reason you belong into a mental institution and you want to use above ground power poles, then you can connect 6 2.45 megawatt medium cables, which in turn produces 2.35 times 6 is 14.1 megawatts. Meaning the best wire here is actually the 15 megawatts one. Again, you can use the 14 megawatts one, but you're going to have 0.1 megawatts missing, which in turn will cause power problems. With the power transformers out of the way, let's talk a bit about the voltage switches. I'm gonna start with the 6x one. In the 6x one, you're going to have two 18 megawatts as inputs and three 13 megawatts as outputs in case you're going to use the scenario I've described originally, the one where you're connecting with underground power cables, only one per electric substation. What I've shown you beforehand is the perfect scenario. Most likely in your republic, unless you're a person that loves to plan for 3 hours, then watch everything get built for the next 8 hours, you won't be able to properly set it up from the get-go. Most likely, your setup will be something like this. You got one input high voltage coming into your 6x switch, then you got one output that continues down the line as a chain. Then goes to other power transformers, continues down the line, etc. Of course, every power transformer is connected to buildings, either residential or factories. Now, what happens to this area over here? Well, let's do a Dora the Explorer question here, since that will make your brain freeze a bit. What's the most important gear in your Soviet Republic? That's right, the need. No, not that one. The other one, your citizens. Why? Well, let's imagine this. Your clothing factory is producing stuff. You don't have enough power since you miscalculated the connection over here. It ends up consuming everything, both your city and the factories. It ends up consuming more than 18 megawatts of power. If you lose power to your clothing factory for 1 or 2 hours, you're gonna lose 1 or 2 tons of clothing in a day due to a small power outage. Big deal. However, if your city is going to remain out of power even for a brief moment, and if it happens constantly, they will be unhappy, revolt, their loyalty will lower, meaning lower productivity at the clothing factory, and their criminality will rise. That's completely a recipe for disaster. Therefore, instead of using a 6-way switch over here, use a priority switch. This means that your input, it comes as high priority from wherever it be, either your production buildings or the border, and then it continues to your factories as lower priority. When it comes to serving your citizens, always leave them in high priority. This means that if for whatever reason everything consumes more than 18 megawatts of power, the power will not be split over each 6x high voltage power switch, but instead it will prioritize feeding the city with electricity, and with whatever electricity left, it goes to your factories to feed them. This way, you entirely make sure that your citizens are happy and they're gonna work happily at the factories themselves. Over here, I've seen not many people mentioning the high voltage priority switch. It's an important piece of equipment that is ignored by most. So, in order to build them, it's pretty simple. You got the high priority switch. It has two types of triangles over here. A triangle going inside and a triangle going outside. If we're gonna place it in the same orientation as this one, the triangle going inside the switch is the one that is coming from your border. It's the input. The triangle going outside the switch is the output. Similar over here. I have the 18 megawatts coming in, 18 megawatts going out, and it's going out with lower priority. And then I have two 13 megawatts hour that goes to my city over here. Of course, you can put these as high priority, or if you're planning to use one of the power transformers for the city itself and the second one to manage your distribution hub, in that case, make sure that the second one you're connecting has medium priority. This allows you to make sure that everything in here is powered up and running properly, so your citizens don't get pissed at you. Let's now discuss about the Trolleybus, Tram and train Trafos. I left this topic closer to the end since I rarely end up using it, and explaining how they work is a bit clunky since there's a ton of variables. In short, the more vehicles you got on the same trafo line, the more power they will use. Moreover, vehicles use power only when accelerating, so the power output you will have on these vehicles is all over the place. Just know that in terms of connections, they work exactly as the electric substations. Namely, you won't be able to daisy chain them and have the second electric connection being powered by the first one. No. You're going to need to have separate power lines going to each individual place, or else you will not have power to the second one. This is true for all of them, be it a trolleybus, a tram trafo, or a railway electric connection. Apart from this nuisance, just test it out. Use the overlays that we're gonna cover in the next topic to check out if you need an extra trafo or an extra line. Also, in order to give power to the line, it's sufficient to just connect it with a rail or a road. Nothing more. There's nothing fancy over here. Speaking of overlays, there are two of them, voltage and wattage. Please note that I'm not quite the best at using overlays, and I might not be explaining them correctly. It's just my own interpretation of them, so feel free to correct me in the comments if I do major mistakes. For the voltage overlay, in order to access it, you need to go to Show Overlays, then Building Properties. Then you got the voltage overlay over here. In case you want it to always be available, you can check this Always Show Overlay checkbox here. Good, now we can close the overlay and see it. Currently, you're gonna see it as 0 volts because I barely loaded the game. If I let it continue, we're gonna see that the voltage is somewhere between 228 and 229. Usually this is the range that I'm happy with, 228 to 230, and also be very careful. I want to mention that only consuming buildings will show it properly. For example, this electric substation over here, instead of having 229 volts, it's actually 21,000 volts, which is actually the most likely megawatts amount, I think. I'm not 100% sure. I only use this overlay to actually check if my buildings are connected. For example, this one over here is not connected. Also, if I see the voltage drop lower than 228, then I have a problem around here. That's kind of all I use it for. In terms of wiring, as you can see, all of them are green. I haven't seen a wire that would be red, and never experienced a wire that is red under the voltage overlay. So something might be fishy, or I'm not interpreting it correctly. However, the other overlay that I want to show is the wattage one. This is the one that I mostly use. Basically, the wattage functions similar to the water. It's the amount of water per second, or megawatts per second, that you are doing. In this case, for example, green means that I'm not reaching the maximum capacity of the wire. Yellow means that I'm past half of that capacity. And red means that I'm using the wire at the maximum capacity. For example, over here, from the oil refinery high voltage switch from here, the priority switch, to this high voltage switch over here, it passes exactly 18 megawatts of power. Also, in regards to megawatts, it doesn't only show the amount that the consumer buildings are using, but it also shows the amount that you are producing, and for whatever reason it's red, I'm not sure why, and also the amount of megawatts passing through a single high voltage switch. Now, coming back to the scenario where I had two wires connected at the same time, two 18 megawatt wires, the amount shown, the maximum amount, would be 36. You can see this scenario over here. Basically, I'm using the power from my gas power plants and transferring them to this high voltage switch, and also some imported power that comes through this line. So when they unify over here, it's more than 18 megawatts. Basically, it's okay to be read on high voltage switches. That's kind of all I can share about the overlays that I'm using in game. As for the last topic, it will be about producing power locally firstly, then using that said power, exporting the excess power you have locally, and also importing power in case something goes wrong. The idea is to avoid the circular imports. Also, you're going to notice that some power will always be imported, and this is normal. Just like Snoop mentioned in his text guide, consider it a safety net fee for whenever you don't produce enough power locally. So, starting off with the coal power plant. It can be a nuclear power plant or a gas power plant, it doesn't matter at all. You will always have two outputs on them. Now, starting off, let's take a priority switch and place it over here. Basically, this priority switch will be the one that we are going to consume power from it. We're gonna pull only a single highest capacity wire from here. Now you might be wondering, why are we pulling a single one if we have two extra things from here to pull? Where the highest amount of power you can get is 18 megawatts per foreign power connection. There's absolutely no reason to pull more than 18 megawatts over here. That's why. If you want to fill in all of the connections over here as outputs, just place smaller capacity wires. It is important over here to never ever connect it to export. This priority switch will only be used locally. There's no connection to export to them. Now we are going to connect our highest voltage wire, highest capacity wire, to the import side. Now we are importing 18 megawatts and using only imported power. Now, logically speaking, we want the priority to come from the coal power plant. So firstly, we're gonna use the coal power plant and barely afterwards use the foreign power connection. Therefore, we're gonna add a new connection over here from the coal power plant directly into the priority switch. Notice that I am connecting it over here at this area. I'm not connecting it on the first one at the rightmost one, but in the middle. It is important because we're gonna use the other one later down the line. Good. Now with this setup, we're gonna say over here at input connection, by hovering over it, we can see which one is which. So we're gonna go with really building on fire. Come on, dude. I'm just not gonna cut this from the video, but let's see what building is on fire. Ah, would you look at that? A power transformer. Oh well, it will go in flames. Anyway, going back to the guide. Now we have it connected, and hovering over it, we can see the exact wires from where they are coming. I want the wire coming from my coal power plant to be high priority. I also want the wire that is importing the electricity to be low priority. Now for this wire, since the output will be always one wire, I can leave it as low priority. The priority on outputs really don't matter. It's based on the logic you want to add. Now we have these connected. We are successfully using power that we produce, and as a backup, we are going to use the foreign power connection. But now you may ask, what happens if I'm producing more than 18 megawatts and I don't use 18 megawatts? Well, that is simple. We're going to have another priority switch over here. And now, please note that I'm gonna explain separately. Firstly, I'll explain the exporting, how it works. I'm going to use the power connection from my coal power plant and connect it to this priority switch. Now, I'm gonna use another wire that comes from here and goes to my exporting foreign power connection over here. Good, so basically now I'm exporting power through this line. But this is not enough because I'm not 100% sure on this, but the two factory connections over here, well, the two power connections over here will be split on half. So 700 megawatts go through this line and 700 megawatts go through this line. I'm not 100% sure on this statement, so take it with a grain of salt. But just to make sure that this power connection over here always gets 18 megawatts, what I can do is to add a high voltage connection from here to here. But be very careful on this. Once I add it, you're going to see an error over here. Do not connect priority switches directly. There is a bug in the game that the math gets messed around and shenanigans happen. Therefore, I would recommend to delete this line firstly, build a high voltage switch over here, even a small one works wonders, and then connect it from here to here and here to here. And now problem solved. Now, of course, over here we have two connections coming from the coal power plant, so I want to make sure that both connections have high priority. Always leave only the connection that is importing as low priority. Now on this side, I also want to do the same thing. I want to make sure that I'm only exporting the power that I'm not using. Therefore, at output connection, I want to make sure that high priority goes to the line that I'm using in my republic, and low priority goes to the line that is going to the power connection over here. Coming back to this high voltage switch, I'm not 100% sure why that error is there. However, I did test it without it and it worked okay. I guess I'm not 100% sure. And this setup over here is the cleanest one that I have as an example. And that's kind of all about the electricity in this game. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you've learned something new, please do smack that like button, and whilst you're at it, might as well subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Also, feel free to leave a comment down below and share this guide with your friends. And if you're interested in more guides, I have a ton of them. Check them out here. Until next time, I'm the Honey Badger and I'm out.